What would you do if you saw a helpless blind man stumbling in the middle of a busy road, cars racing past, danger just seconds away? Would you walk away like everyone else, or would you risk your own safety to carry him across? Now imagine this. What if that blind man was secretly a billionaire, testing the kindness of the world? And what if the poor orphan who carried him was also hiding a secret worth billions? Stay with me because this story will leave you questioning, who truly carries who when love and power collide? The skyline of New York glittered with wealth and power, but Ryan Carter felt nothing but emptiness as he looked out from the balcony of his penthouse. At 32 he had everything most men dreamed of: fortune, influence, even the respect of world leaders. Yet to him it was a gilded cage. Every date he had gone on in the last 5 years ended the same way, with a woman either trying to impress him with fake sophistication or subtly probing into his wealth. Love, he realized, had become impossible to find when everyone saw him only as a billionaire. His assistant, David, walked in holding a tablet with the latest market updates. "Sir, the Asia deal closed successfully. You just made another 200 million. Ryan forced a smile. 200 million more, but it couldn't buy him the one thing he craved: sincerity. That night, as he sat alone in his library, he remembered a conversation with his late mother. "Ryan," she had once said, "a person's true nature isn't revealed when you give them riches, but when you take them away. If you ever want to find someone real, you must strip yourself of everything they could use against you." The words echoed now, sharper than ever. He grabbed his phone and dialed David. "Give me plain clothes, simple shoes, and a walking cane." David was puzzled. "Sir? I'm leaving the city for a while. I'll pretend to be blind." David's eyes widened. "Blind? With all respect, why?" "Because," Ryan said quietly, "only someone who can love a man with nothing will ever love me for who I am." 2 days later, dressed in cheap jeans, a faded shirt, dark glasses, and holding a cane, Ryan boarded a bus heading to a small town 2 states away. For the first time in his life, nobody looked at him with admiration or envy. On the contrary, some passengers avoided sitting near him. He felt the sting of being invisible, unwanted, a life he had never known. It was both terrifying and liberating. When the bus stopped in a sleepy little town, Ryan got off, dragging his small duffel bag. The place smelled of fresh bread from a nearby bakery, and the streets were lined with mom-and-pop shops. No paparazzi, no skyscrapers, just simplicity. But pretending to be blind was harder than he thought. Every step was a challenge. He tapped his cane carefully, but the uneven sidewalk made him stumble. Pedestrians walked past, too busy to notice. A group of teenagers even snickered as he fumbled near a traffic light. Then it happened, his cane slipped from his grasp and rolled into the road. Cars sped by, horns blaring. Ryan froze, pretending to panic as he reached out helplessly. People stood on the sidewalk watching, but no one moved to help. At that moment, a soft but firm voice broke through the noise. "Don't move. I'll help you." And then, small hands gripped his arm with surprising strength. The traffic light flickered from green to red, but the impatient drivers didn't seem to care. Horns blared, tires screeched, and the sharp smell of exhaust filled the air. Ryan stood frozen at the edge of the crosswalk, caneless and helpless, playing his role as a blind man with trembling hands stretched into the void. He could hear people whispering, "Poor guy, but it's not my problem. Why's he even out here alone?" A harsh laugh cut through. "If he gets hit, that's on him." The sting of their indifference pierced Ryan deeper than he expected. He thought pretending to be blind would simply be a disguise, but in that moment he truly felt the fear of vulnerability. Then through the blur of voices, one rang clear, a gentle but commanding tone. "Hold still. Don't move, I'm coming." Before he could process it, small but steady hands grasped his arm. She was shorter than him, but her grip was firm, protective. He smelled faint lavender and old paper clinging to her clothes, as if she had just come from a bookshop. "You dropped your cane," she said breathlessly. "But don't worry, I'll get you across." Ryan, still in character, tilted his face toward her. "The traffic, it sounds dangerous." "It is," she admitted, eyes darting at the roaring cars. Fear flickered across her face, but determination quickly replaced it. "But you're not going to get hurt while I'm here." The light changed again and vehicles surged forward. Pedestrians hesitated on the sidewalk, unwilling to risk stepping out. Isabella's heart pounded. She looked at Ryan, tall, broad-shouldered, far heavier than her slim frame should handle. Yet, when another horn blared dangerously close, instinct took over. "Hold on to me," she said quickly. Then, with surprising strength fueled by urgency, she bent, pulled his arm over her shoulder, and lifted him partly into her arms. Gasps erupted from the onlookers. A thin young woman carrying a grown man across the road, it seemed impossible. But Isabella didn't falter. Step by trembling step, she forced her way forward, clutching Ryan against her as though her life depended on it. Ryan, though capable of walking, let himself go limp, stunned by the raw courage in her every movement. He could feel her heart racing against his chest, yet her voice stayed calm. "You're safe. Just a little further. Don't worry, I won't drop you." At last they reached the other side. Isabella staggered but didn't collapse. She gently set him down on a bench beneath a flickering streetlight, her face pale but determined. "There," she said with a tired smile, brushing hair from her forehead. "You made it." Ryan stared at her behind his dark glasses, heart thundering. In that instant he knew this woman was unlike anyone he had ever met. She hadn't just guided him, she had carried him when everyone else turned away. And though she had no idea, in carrying a man she thought was blind and poor, she had just lifted the heart of a billionaire. The next morning, Ryan found himself wandering through the quiet streets of the little town. He held his cane loosely, tapping at the pavement, letting the disguise continue. His mind, however, was not on the act. It was on the woman who had carried him across the road like a fragile child when everyone else had turned away. Who was she? His question was answered sooner than expected. The faint scent of old paper and lavender drifted from a shop tucked between a bakery and a tailor's. Above the door, painted in faded letters, was the name, Moore's Books. Ryan pushed the door open. A soft bell chimed, and the warm aroma of aged pages and brewed tea washed over him. Shelves stretched high with books, stacked neatly and lovingly, though the shop itself looked modest, almost struggling. "Hello," he called, keeping his voice low, still pretending. A familiar voice answered from behind a counter. "You. The man from yesterday." Ryan turned toward the sound. Isabella emerged, wearing a simple dress with a cardigan draped over her shoulders. There were faint shadows under her eyes, proof of hard work and little rest, but her smile was genuine. "You're safe," she said warmly. "How are you feeling?" Ryan adjusted his glasses. "Better, thanks to you. I owe you my life." She waved a hand. "Nonsense. Anyone would have done the same." Ryan almost laughed. No, they wouldn't, he thought. He had witnessed the cold stares of dozens who turned away. She alone had acted. "Do you work here?" he asked, keeping up his role. "Yes," Isabella nodded. "This bookstore belonged to my parents. After they passed, I kept it running. It's not much, but it's home." There was a softness in her words, a quiet pride. Ryan tilted his head, intrigued. "And you run this place all alone?" She nodded again. "I manage. The people in town don't read much anymore, so business is slow, but the books, they remind me of better times." She hesitated, then added, "And I like helping people find stories. Sometimes stories are the only thing that keep us alive." Ryan's chest tightened. There was a sadness beneath her strength, a loneliness he couldn't quite name. "Would you mind reading to me sometime?" he asked suddenly. Her eyebrows lifted. "Read to you?" "Yes. Since I can't see." He gestured to his glasses, letting his voice falter slightly. "It would mean more than you know." For a moment, Isabella studied him, her eyes softening. Then she smiled. "Of course. Come by any time." From that day on, Ryan began visiting Moore's Books every afternoon. Isabella would sit across from him, reading aloud from old novels, poetry, even history books. Her voice carried warmth and rhythm, pulling him into worlds far beyond the shop. What surprised him most wasn't the books themselves but the way she read, with emotion, with meaning, as if every word mattered. And slowly, beneath the dusty shelves of a struggling bookstore, a billionaire disguised as a blind man and a poor orphan found the first spark of something neither had expected: trust. The days melted into weeks, and Ryan found himself at Moore's Books almost every afternoon. For the first time in years he felt at peace. Gone were the suffocating boardrooms and endless meetings. Here, time slowed, and Isabella's voice filled the silence with warmth as she read aloud from books chosen carefully for him. One evening, rain pattered softly against the windows while the smell of freshly brewed tea lingered in the air. Isabella sat in a chair opposite him, reading from Great Expectations. Her voice rose and fell with the rhythm of Dickens' words, alive with emotion. Ryan leaned back, eyes hidden behind his dark glasses, though he wasn't truly blind. He studied her in silence, the way her brows furrowed when a passage grew heavy, the small smile tugging at her lips when the characters found joy. She wasn't just reading a book, she was living it. When she closed the novel, Ryan said softly, You make the words sound like music. Isabella laughed gently. That's because I believe stories are meant to be felt, not just read. He hesitated, then asked, do you ever wish your story were different? The question seemed to strike something inside her. Her gaze drifted to the rain outside. All the time. But wishing doesn't change reality. She paused, her voice dropping lower. I grew up with nothing. Lost my parents young. People like me don't get fairy tales, Ryan. We just survive. Ryan felt an ache in his chest. He wanted to tell her everything, that he wasn't poor, that he wasn't blind, that he could change her life with a single phone call. But he held back. If she knew the truth too soon, would she see him differently? Would she treat him like everyone else had? Instead, he reached across the table, finding her hand. Sometimes, surviving is its own kind of strength. Isabella froze for a moment, then let her fingers curl lightly around his. She smiled, though her eyes glistened. You say that like you know what it means to struggle. Ryan swallowed hard, forcing a chuckle. Maybe not the way you have, but I've struggled in other ways. The air grew heavier, intimate. Both of them were hiding truths, yet both longed to be understood. That night, when Ryan left the bookstore, Isabella watched him through the rain-streaked window. She pressed her hand against the glass, whispering to herself, why does he feel different? Like he carries a burden I can't see? Meanwhile, Ryan walked slowly down the street, cane tapping at the pavement, his heart torn. She thought he was a poor blind man. He thought she was just a struggling orphan. Neither knew the other's truth. But both carried the same fear. If I reveal who I really am, will they still stay? Ryan sat in the corner of Moore's books, listening to Isabella read aloud from a worn volume of poetry. The room smelled of dust and lavender, and her voice was calm, steady, like a lighthouse guiding him through fog. But tonight, Ryan's mind wasn't fully present. His phone, buzzing quietly in his pocket, pulled him back to a reality he'd been avoiding. He excused himself gently and stepped outside into the crisp evening air. Pulling the phone from his coat, he answered in a hushed tone. Sir, came the low voice of Charles, his longtime personal assistant. I've respected your wishes, but this has gone on long enough. The board is restless. They need you back in the city. And this act, pretending to be blind, living like a commoner, it's dangerous. What if someone recognizes you? Ryan pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of his nose, frustration simmering. I'm not ready to return yet, Charles. I need this time. And he stopped himself before saying too much. Charles's tone sharpened. Sir, please tell me you haven't entangled yourself. This isn't a game. But Ryan ended the call without answering, pocketing the phone with a sigh. He couldn't explain Isabella to Charles, not yet. How could he? Even he didn't fully understand why he was drawn to her. When he stepped back inside, Isabella looked up from the book, her brows knitting. Everything all right? Yes, Ryan lied smoothly. Just business I'd rather forget. She studied him for a beat longer, then let it go. But the seed of curiosity had been planted. Across town, another storm brewed. Isabella's uncle, Leonard, shuffled through bills at his cluttered kitchen table, muttering curses under his breath. A thin man with sharp eyes and a mean streak, Leonard had been looking after Isabella since her parents' deaths. In truth, he saw her less as family and more as a burden, until he realized her late parents had left assets hidden away, assets she wasn't even aware of. For now, he controlled the bookstore property papers, dangling them over her like a leash. But what infuriated him was the rumor he'd heard from a nosy neighbor. Isabella had been spending her evenings with a blind stranger. Leonard slammed his fist against the table. First, she embarrasses me by refusing every suitor I arrange. Now she's wasting time with some penniless cripple? He sneered. No. If she marries, it'll be to someone who benefits me. That night, as Isabella closed up the bookstore, Leonard appeared at the doorway, reeking of tobacco and bitterness. You've been keeping company, he said coldly. Don't think I don't know. Isabella stiffened. He's just a friend. A friend? Leonard scoffed. You can't afford friends. You owe me. Remember who keeps this roof over your head. His eyes narrowed. Stay away from that blind fool, or I'll make sure you lose everything. Fear flickered in Isabella's chest, but she held her chin high. You don't own me, uncle. Yet as she watched him disappear into the night, her hands trembled. She couldn't risk losing the bookstore, it was all she had left of her parents. But how could she turn away from Ryan, the one person who made her feel seen, even though he claimed he couldn't see at all? The evening sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson as Isabella arranged books on the front display. Ryan leaned casually against the counter, his cane propped beside him. Though his dark glasses still covered his eyes, he wasn't listening to the sound of her footsteps. He was watching her, forgetting himself. "You're staring," Isabella said suddenly without looking up. Ryan froze. "What?" She smirked faintly. "Blind or not, I can feel it when someone's staring." His throat went dry. For a second too long he said nothing, and in that silence, a book slipped from his hand. Instinctively, without fumbling, he bent and caught it before it hit the ground. Isabella turned, eyes narrowing. The movement had been too swift, too precise. Ryan's mind raced. He forced an awkward laugh, tapping the cane against the floor. Even blind men get lucky sometimes. Her gaze lingered, suspicion clouding her expression, but she let it pass. Still, the moment rattled him. He had promised himself not to slip, not to let her see the truth, not until he knew her heart. That same night, Isabella returned home to find her uncle waiting in the parlor, papers spread across the table. His lips curled into a cruel smile. "Do you know what this is?" Leonard asked, waving the papers. She shook her head cautiously. "Your parents' estate," he sneered. "Every last deed and asset they left behind. And it's all under my control until you're married." Isabella's heart pounded. "You told me they left nothing." Leonard's laugh was cold. "Why do you think I've been so eager to see you wed? A husband of my choosing would sign everything back to me. But you," his eyes darkened. "You'd rather waste your time with that blind pauper. Do you want to end up on the streets?" Tears stung her eyes, but she stood firm. "You're lying. My parents wouldn't have left me with nothing but chains." "Call it lying if you want," Leonard spat. "But unless you do as I say, you'll lose the bookstore. The papers say it belongs to me until you wed. Consider this your last warning." He stormed out, leaving Isabella trembling. For the first time she realized just how deep her uncle's betrayal ran. Later, as she sat alone among the bookshelves, Ryan entered quietly. He noticed her red eyes and the stiffness in her posture. "What's wrong?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "Nothing I can't handle." Ryan reached for her hand, feeling her pulse quicken. For a brief moment, he wanted to rip off the glasses to tell her everything, that he wasn't blind, that he wasn't poor, that he could take her pain away with a single word. But he didn't. Not yet. Because both of them were still trapped by the same fear. If I reveal my truth, will I lose her forever? The next day, Isabella arrived at the bookstore later than usual, her expression tired but resolved. Ryan immediately noticed the change in her demeanor. Her smile was gone, her shoulders tense, and her hands trembled as she arranged the books on the counter. "What happened?" Ryan asked gently, leaning forward. "Nothing," she muttered, avoiding his gaze. Ryan lowered his voice. "Isabella, you've been kind to me from the first day we met. Please, don't shut me out now." For a long moment she said nothing. Then, with a shaky sigh, she sat down across from him. "My uncle, he's been lying to me for years. My parents left more than I ever knew, land, shares, even property, but he controls it all. He says unless I marry someone of his choosing, I'll lose everything. Even this bookstore." Ryan's jaw tightened. Fury coursed through him, but he kept his voice calm. "And you've let him control you all this time?" Her chin lifted. "I had no choice. I thought I was powerless. But I'm done living in fear." Ryan admired the fire in her eyes. She wasn't just a fragile orphan, she was a woman of strength. And yet, part of him ached with guilt. If only she knew he wasn't the helpless blind man she believed him to be. That evening, as Isabella locked the shop, Leonard appeared again. His face twisted with anger. "You're defying me?" he hissed. "Yes," Isabella said, her voice firm. "You don't own me or my future. I'll fight you if I must." Leonard's face darkened. "Then you'll regret it." From the shadows Ryan watched, fists clenched. He vowed silently, she won't fight this battle alone. 2 nights later Leonard made good on his threat. He barged into the bookstore while Isabella was closing, waving legal papers. "This place is mine. Get out." Isabella's voice shook but didn't falter. "You forged those papers. You think I won't fight you in court?" Leonard sneered. "With what money? With what lawyer?" At that moment, Ryan stepped forward from the corner, removing his glasses. His piercing gaze landed squarely on Leonard. "You won't touch her," Ryan said firmly. Leonard spun, eyes widening. You're not blind." Isabella gasped, turning to Ryan. "What?" Ryan's chest tightened. This wasn't how he wanted her to find out. But there was no turning back now. "I never meant to deceive you, Isabella," he said, voice raw. I came here looking for truth, for someone who saw me, not my money, not my status. I pretended because I needed to know if kindness still existed in this world." He turned to her, his eyes pleading. "And then I found you." Her breath hitched, betrayal and confusion flashing across her face. Leonard laughed bitterly. "So the cripple's a fraud. Figures. But that still doesn't change anything. This property belongs to me." Ryan's lips curled into a cold smile. "Actually, it doesn't. I know exactly what Isabella's parents left her. I've seen the original documents. And I have the power to make sure you pay for every lie, every forgery." Leonard's face paled as Ryan pulled out a phone, dialing a number. "Charles," Ryan said calmly, "send the lawyers. Tonight." For the first time, Leonard realized the man before him wasn't just any stranger. He was someone with wealth and power far beyond his own. He stumbled back, fear replacing arrogance. Isabella, however, could only stare at Ryan, her world spinning. After Leonard was dragged away by the police for fraud and forgery, silence filled the bookstore. Isabella sat in a chair, her hands clasped tightly, eyes glistening with confusion. "You lied to me," she whispered. "All this time." Ryan knelt before her, his voice breaking. "I did. And I regret it. But everything I felt, everything I said, was real. You're the only person who's ever looked at me and seen more than money." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You don't understand. I'm not who you think I am either." Ryan frowned. "What do you mean?" She drew a shaky breath. "My uncle was right about one thing. My parents left more than just this bookstore. They left businesses, land, wealth I never claimed because I never wanted it to define me. I wanted to be known as Isabella, not as someone's heiress." Ryan froze. You're a billionaire too?" She nodded slowly. "Yes. I just never told anyone because I needed to know who truly cared for me." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then unexpectedly Ryan laughed, soft, relieved, almost incredulous. "All this time," he said, shaking his head, "we were both pretending to be less than we are, just to find something real." Her lips trembled into a smile. "And we found each other." Months later, the town buzzed with whispers as the church bells rang. Isabella walked down the aisle in a simple but elegant gown, her eyes glowing not with wealth but with love. Ryan stood waiting, his gaze fixed only on her. There was no pretense now. No disguises. No secrets. When they spoke their vows, Ryan's voice cracked with emotion. "I loved you when you thought I was blind. I'll love you when the world sees us both clearly." Isabella's tears fell freely as she replied, "I loved you when I thought you were poor. I'll love you when the world calls us billionaires. Because all I ever wanted was you." The congregation erupted into applause as they kissed, two souls who had tested each other without knowing, and in the end found truth in love, not wealth. As they left the church hand in hand, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing them in golden light. For the first time in their lives both felt free, not because of the fortunes they possessed, but because they had finally found someone who saw past it all. And so, the story that began with a poor orphan carrying a blind stranger across a road ended with two billionaires carrying each other through life, not for wealth, not for power, but for love that was real.